Faoilleach, welcome to a week in the life of a Gaelic writer. This week I'm going to be talking about cover design and about translation. But before I start on either of those topics, I need to mention something that I completely forgot about last week, which is that Leven Leor was broadcast on the 5th of January. This is the programme for which we went down to Abbotsford in the Scottish borders to the house built by Sir Walter Scott to talk about his work and his legacy. So the programme went out last week, but if you missed it, it is still available on the iPlayer for another 3 weeks, so you can catch up, and I will link that below. So, this week I went to visit my publisher to meet the cover designer for my new book, Faoilleach Dorsen. And cover design is always fascinating because it's amazing what the designers come back with. And quite often the author is the wrong person or the last person that you should ask what should be on the cover, because I don't know. When you're writing the book, you're so involved in the story and in minute details that it can sometimes be quite difficult to explain to someone what's your book about. But covers are important. I know people say you shouldn't judge a book by its cover, but people do. So I've got some examples of what I think are good and not so good covers here. This was the book that I was talking about on Crimecan this week. This is Dacha Mogul by Taramat Machgilehen. Sorry about that, Machgilehen. And of course, this is an eye-catching cover. Look at the ostriches. They are comical animals to begin with. They also appear to have, it'll be too small to see, but the picture of Norman on the back of this book, he has a little spiky haircut, which is almost like the ostrich's feathers, which to me makes it doubly amusing. So nobody's going to walk past that cover and not stop and have a look at it. So it does its job, it draws people's attention. And not every book does that. So the next episode of Crimecan is going to be looking at this book, which, well, the cover doesn't really tell you anything about this, does it? This is a series of books for 10 to 14-year-olds published by Achker, and there are a number of them in the series, and they all have the same concept for the cover, which is basically just the typography. There's no... there are some images in that are... I don't know how you would describe them, embossed perhaps, I'm not sure if that's the right term, but there are some little images, but they don't really shout to you what kind of a book this is. So to me, this is not a brilliant cover. This doesn't make you say, oh wow, I love that, I'm going to have a look at that. And then maybe you look at it and you think, oh, actually this is not the sort of book I'm interested in, but it got your attention, it did the first thing that a cover needs to do. Of course, you can spend a lot of money commissioning original artwork for a cover. That might not be the best way to go. You could also spend a lot of money licensing an image for a cover. And an example of that, which I don't have to hand actually, is An Clachan ag Damien Hirst, where there was a photograph of the diamond-encrusted skull that Damien Hirst made, which was licensed to be used on the cover of that book by Clar. That's a striking cover. It's probably worth buying that, but if you choose the wrong image, then you've wasted your money. But you can make a very effective cover with photo stock and images that you can buy or that you can license. You can be too simple about it. I think that's probably too simple. Uprech, these white silhouette figures. That doesn't really tell me that this is a book about some troubled teenagers in Dublin. I think a little more craft could have gone into that. But on the other hand, this one, Caution Gunna, which again featured in Crimecan a couple of weeks ago, that's an example of licensed images that have been put together. So there's a picture of a bombed out city with this red wash in the background, and then the silhouette of the soldier, and that's embossed in this shiny effect here. I should have looked up how to describe this effect on the cover. So to me, that's a cover that tells you that this is a book about a soldier. That works. A design that I really do like a lot is this one. This is An Taishtealach by Ian Finlay MacLeod, and it's a sci-fi book, and it features a woman who is travelling from planet to planet. So here's this astronaut figure on the front, and there are little hints to the style of sci-fi books of previous eras. So the yellow colour signifies a sci-fi, and there's a slightly retro feel to the font. So all these things, I think, help to make a good design catch the eye and grab the attention, and also point you in the right direction, because there's no point having a cover that looks like a bodice ripper if inside it's a hard-boiled thriller, and there's no point in having a cover that looks like a ghost story when inside it's a book of some other genre. So it has to signal to the reader, to the potential reader, that this is the sort of book they're looking for. Now, it's easy to say, well, shouldn't the reader rise above that and seek out the work? It's what's inside the book that counts. People are busy, people don't have time, people are browsing, and there are thousands and thousands of titles all competing for their attention. The other thing, of course, is this is the book at 8 inches tall, but it also has to work at an inch high as a thumbnail on a website, or even smaller if you're looking at it on a mobile phone. So all of that information, all the connotations that a cover might conjure up about the contents of the book, all of that has to be conveyed in this tight little package. So cover design really is an art, and I am in awe of the designers who are capable of making a really good cover. So I am excited to see what the designer for the cover of Faoilleach Faoilleach Dorson is going to come back with. We had a talk on Tuesday about the book, about some of the stories in it. I feel that I didn't do a particularly good job of describing what's in the book. Now, of course, he doesn't speak Gaelic, so he's not going to be able to read the book. Most designers probably don't have time to read the book anyway if they're given the task of designing a cover. So, but you need to convey something of something about what the book is about and be on the same wavelength. And I hope that we will come up with something that works. So let's see. The other thing that I wanted to discuss is translation, because this week I have been translating some of my own work, some old short stories, the oldest of them going back, in fact, to 2006. I am going to put some of these stories out in English, and people have been saying to me for a while, when are you going to write something in English? Well, now I'm writing something in English. So I have in mind a small collection which will be a mixture of original English short stories, sorry, that sounds wrong, stories written first in English and stories written first in Gaelic and now translated into English. And some will have been published before and some will not have been published before. And it's quite an interesting exercise to have to translate your own work, because having created it in one language, it is by no means simple to rework it in another language, even though I'm working from a language I've learnt in adulthood into my mother tongue, so working from Gaelic into English. If you do this with something that you've written, even something that's been published, you will invariably find mistakes that you've made in the original, and then you'll think, how did that get past me and my editor and the proofreader and all these people? It's out there now, and it's been out there for 12 years. And sometimes it's difficult to distance yourself, to take a step back from the original language, and not make the English version sound like a translation. So what I've found, it's been a very interesting exercise. Sometimes I have to look up a word. And I think, what on earth did I mean when I wrote that? And sometimes having found that word, it just doesn't sound right in English. So what I'm generally doing is I'm doing several passes. The first one is just to crunch the words and get all the material into the target language. And then to go back and not refer any more to the original. Of course, I am giving myself permission to do this. I'm giving myself permission to make quite a free translation because it is my own work, and who's going to come back and argue that I didn't stick closely enough to the original? And if you're translating somebody else's work, or if you are required to make a much more accurate translation, you may need to wrestle more with some of these sticky sentences that aren't coming right. Whereas I feel I can take a lot more license. So that's an interesting process. I'm not quite sure when I'm going to publish that book. I think it will probably be an ebook only, but watch this space. It, of course, will also need a cover, and I'm going to have to think about what kind of cover image best conveys the contents of that book, especially since it's a collection of short stories. So if you have lots of different subjects, how do you choose? So all those challenges are ahead of me. Of course, Faoilleach a Geistigh Dorsen will be coming out. There will also be an event to mark its launch in March, and that will be at the I Write Festival. And just as I was coming home this evening, I saw texts appearing, I saw tweets appearing saying that the programme for I Write has just been published. So I will link to that below, and then I will talk more in another video about how the progress is coming along with the book, with the cover, and more about that event which will take place in March. So, gus an feich mé hiise van ácheach going, mar sin leif.